Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the Occult Exploration Society Live. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Ryan Seven, Jevin, and Dion, as well as our special guest Andrew of Old Boy. How's it going?
We need a
Going
theme
good.
tune.
Yeah,
We need an opening theme tune. It's the Occult Exploration Society. I think that might be copyrighted.
Oh my God. But you're right, we do need something. But today we're all brought together to talk about purple, to talk about the Murex dye from ancient antiquity, to get into all of the mystery, the mire, the drugs, the entomology. This is going to be so much fun because, especially over the last little while, Old Boy Andrew on his channel, you've been doing an incredible amount of research. You've released about 4 or 5 videos now, just talking about sources, going over what the purple is, as well as you've been volunteering at an archaeological site near you that you've been discussing. Can you just go over what your research has been and what you've been working on lately?
Yeah, so first off, there was news that on a dig close to home, which was the excavation of a Roman bathhouse, they obviously uncovered or found a piece of Tyrian purple, or what's commonly referred to as Tyrian purple. And I thought, well, it's really close to home. I got a chance to go onto the site, and I thought it would be a great chance to showcase the site where it was found, so people who were obviously from across the pond can see where it was found. And then I thought what would be nice to do as well is to look into, for argument's sake, the origin of the purple according to some of the sources, and I used the onomasticon, the medical uses of the dye, and I used a text from Dioscorides, and then the religious and cult connections to the dye as well. And I looked at a few texts there showing how it seems to have connections to the early cults, Medea, Calchas from the Iliad, people like that. And then how some of these themes, this language that's being used, and also the image of the purple is then also carried on into early Christianity and even later into mainstream Christianity also. So that was kind of my plan. And it basically all centered around just this discovery close to home. So that's what inspired me to produce these videos.
Wasn't it found in a toilet or something like that, or down a drain?
In a drain.
This lump of purple.
It was in the drain of the bathhouse, and apparently this is where they found most of the finds. So a lot of intaglios, a lot of beads. They found them all in the drains. So there must
Why would you have a lump of purple in a bathhouse? Can you make sense of that?
Well,
were they smuggling drugs in unusual places? And
well, the thing is, this the finds at the bathhouse have been hailed as being internationally significant, and they believe there's a connection to the royal court of Emperor Septimius Severus. Now that's based on a few finds. So they found the tiles with IMP stamped on it, Imperator, the royal seal. They've found inscriptions to Julia Domna there as well. The bathhouse itself, there's frescoes, there's painted plasterwork inside. It's got heated rooms, and obviously then the find of the purple, and also Emperor Septimius Severus was in the area at the time. There's a written account which connects him with Carlisle. So
funnily enough,
together.
He had a fort in the village where I was born, in a place called Blackrod, which is still the old wall still surrounds the village.
Ah, right.
And Septimus Severus stayed there for a long time and did lots of his commanding from there, apparently.
Ah, right. There you go.
Really?
So yeah, he was certainly active.
He's got a really cool name, Septimus Severus. That's what you want to be called, that.
So before we get super deep into this, what I want to try to understand is, what do you think is going on? Like, a lot of people are deeply confused about the purple. So when I'm looking into it, there seems to be 2 conflicting paths. There's the path that says that this was largely just a high commodity trade good that inspired the growth of empires and became this, caused all these wars, caused all this production, but largely it was just a dye, and it was extremely expensive because of the intense amount of laborious effort that went into it. Took thousands and thousands of snails that had to be kept alive and then crushed, and had their flowers removed by hand and milked for this dye. It's an incredible laborious process. But within a lot of these texts, especially like you've been showing, you have all of these references to magic and to mythological characters. And I just want to get everyone's general opinions on what they think the purple is about and what is happening within the mystery rites and within this mythological context. Because to me, it's clearly more than just a dye, right? There's a lot more going on. It doesn't just become such a powerful empire building force, right?
Well, I think the first thing before anything else is said, that entire little diatribe there of what it meant in the ancient world, how it was attached to royalty and money, and it was difficult to source. And when you do see that process, there's many videos on YouTube of it, and you can see how long it takes. And like you said, it seems a bit cruel as well. And there's a lot, and it's stinky. Apparently, you could get divorced if your husband became a dye maker after you got married.
The fabric smelled apparently, and could smell for months.
Couldn't stop smelling.
Yeah.
You just smelled a fish all the time. My ex-girlfriend's stepdad was a fishmonger, and the second you walked into his house, it just smelled like fish. It was awful. It was horrible. But what I want to say is that, well, look, already it's magical. Already it's a charged talisman. Already it's so important, and people think so much of it. It's there for tricksters, but it's also there for magicians and ritualists and religious types. I just think that's worth bearing in mind when we talk about everything else from now on. Like that must, it's
You're
important.
Right. You're right. It doesn't.
And I think that is its main feature, more than its medical process.
It doesn't need anything else other than the story, right? And it's the story that we attach to any product that can make it magical, and connecting it to kings, connecting it to myth and rarity will all do this, right? Which is why this is such a strong theory, right? That many academics ascribe to. But like Andrew, you were bringing up, these medical texts and references to Medea. We know all of this is drug rights. What is your perspective?
So basically, I can't comment, obviously, on the chemical composition of it, what effects it's having, if it's having any effects. I can't comment on any of that. But what I can say is we've seen that there's a reference to Medea when she's preparing the Promethean drug. And it says, if somebody was to moisten their body with this drug, that they wouldn't be affected by cuts from bronze, they wouldn't flinch away from fire. And it's prepared in a cochloi, which is a dative of cochlos, which is the shell, which is referred to as the purple murex shell. So this Promethean drug has this connection. And then when we look at also people like Calchas from the Iliad, his name is derived from Calche, which is another word for the purple murex. So that's two people who are operating within this oracular rite who have connections to this murex. And then you find authors like Dioscorides, and he's mentioning the medical applications. Now, again, I can't comment if these applications were working. All I can present to you is what he's saying in the text. Although I have recently just seen a medical journal which was investigating the medical effects of it. And they were the conclusion said it seemed to warrant further investigation into treating things with inflammation and things like that. And what's interesting is Dioscorides actually says that you can use it to treat what he calls, the inflamed parts as well. So I thought that was quite interesting.
When you said can't be cut with bronze, what was the one before that? What was that? Impervious to fire, did you say?
Unflinching towards fire. A word that can mean
perhaps it's that kind of an idea. That sounds like a a poetic way of putting, maybe it's good for inflammation and things that burn you, and I hear it's good for cuts. It seems to be good for so many things. I looked into it as a homeopathic remedy in India, like to see if it's actually used anywhere today, and sure enough, in India. And I found out from this one Indian chap who actually thought was speaking Hindi at first, but it turned out he was speaking English. That it was used for so many different things. I'll get snappy laughing now. So so yeah, it's so many things. Still, it seems centered on the feminine issues of life, and as far as I know, it did come from the midwifery back in the day. So it is used for a lot of those things, but also things like instant and aggressive. I forget the word, but it was like an inflammation of a happier kind, if you know what I'm saying. Yeah, a raging one apparently. So you know, it was lots of stuff like this, things like unusual things like prolapses and stuff like that. And when I drilled down to it, it seemed that it was actually really playing with the hormones. That's essentially what it's doing, like giving sudden bursts of hormones in that sexual area is what it seems to be, you know, doing in all these cases.
We do know that a big part of the right is the drug that causes satyriasis, right? Or that causes the foam within the female. So there wouldn't be surprised that we're going to have these kind of drugs, and if the purple is a part of that, that makes sense. But Kevin, what's your take on the purple? Like, where you did a lot of research and you were showing me some stuff about Lebanon and stuff. What is your take on all this?
Well, I'm wanting to do a complimentary short video that talks about the difference in the male and female murexes, okay? There is a difference in the compound, the chemical, and it makes a variation in the color. So that I'm wanting to actually present in like a story form to be able to express that from an old 1800s book. And then there was another one that talked about, it could be the same one. It talked about how that they used it in the Hebrew tabernacle as like the tassels, like the 4 tassel color, right?
They used it for the purple and the blue in the ancient Hebrew. Yeah.
Right. So, and to think of it like that, and with the Messiah being of this type of descent, and how you could be killed if you were caught using this purple, it's really easy for me to make those connections, putting 2 and 2 together. You see how that was strictly only used in their tabernacle in that process. So
cool.
Yeah, it seems to have that same kind of king building association that we see with other mythologies that we'll get into with the deep presentation, for sure. What is your thoughts, Dion?
Oh, the purple's very ancient, and it's not just the shells itself as well. As you got stones, you got quartz, amethyst, and there's different quarries in Egypt that are connected to the royal families. These imperators that we're talking about, the Roman families, had quarries in Egypt, in the birthing chambers in Turkey. It deals with purple as a color itself, with stones as well. Now the murex, the shell, the mollusk, I'm sure today we'll talk about the dibromo indigo, which is the chemical component of it, and how it's related to, people are making drugs out of that in modern times. Chemists are researching anti-inflammatories, antiviral, anti-cancer, dealing with these shells. And but these same shells were used in ancient Egypt as well, going back to the rituals with Sobek and the Nile River. People call it anointing of the Messiah, means to be anointing. Well, that anointing process had those shells part of it as well. It not even just the shells, they had acacia. Acacia makes a type of a purple. We know the techelet, that's at the Daya pits in Israel, Ashkelon, where all the madness is taking place today, were dye pits where they were getting the blue from the shells, because the blue is what's on the robes in the Orthodox Israeli and Hebrew rituals you'll see in Judaism. That's from a shell as well. And so, and how you make purple with the red and blue together. And the red and blue dyes traditionally are psychoactives in these cultures there in the Levant, from acacia, from Syrian rue, from the blue lily to the murex shell.
You Kermes insects on the trees.
Yes, exactly. That's the red right there, the Kermes. And people say the Kermes insect is the manna in the Bible. And so it's about the dyes, exploring the colors and the dyes are psychoactive. And so I would posit that a lot of the purple in the area has properties when you look it up. But the murex is special because it takes 10,000 shells just to make a little itty bitty type of it.
Tiny bit, yeah.
You know, and even crocus, Kermes. So yeah, so I know I would like to tell everybody, first of all, go on your computer, subscribe to Old Boy, subscribe to Ryan 7. There's so much information there that you're just getting the tip of the iceberg today. They're just sharing just a little bit with you. They're actually going to the sites. So, you know, subscribe to them. And we also got a slide presentations and pictures coming. I know there's a lot of pictures they got, so get ready. We're going to have a wild show today.
Yeah. So with that in mind, you said something that's really interesting that connects a bunch of this stuff. The anointing oil, the christening oil, right? That's Christos magic, that's Medea magic, and it's about what? Protection from fire. And it connects to all this. And we're going to go deep into it when I go through my presentation here, but we're going to set the stage a little bit first. So this is widely considered the oldest use of the various shades of these snail dyes. This is from ancient Minoan Crete, right? And this would be 15th century BCE. That's the earliest we have seen, but some scholars suggest that this was being done even far earlier than the 15th century. But by the 15th century, we have these incredible blues, these reds and purples, all derived from the murex shell. And this is still vibrant like this, right? Like, look at this incredible Minoan pottery with these shades that they're getting from these dyes, you know? It's beautiful stuff. And here's an example of one of these modern type of snails that would be used. This is the Hexaplex trunculus. You know, there were 3 or 4 different ones that would be used, but this was the most common for producing the particular Tyrian purple, okay, in specific. If we look here, this is from a laboratory where archaeologists were trying to recreate the specific methods that were being used as attested by Pliny and others in the ancient sources. So this is them manually separating these flowers from these things and then grinding them up in a mortar and pestle by hand and producing these liquids that then would be dried to give you various shades. Here we have a variation of the process, and you can see you could even get teals and greens from these shells. You could get purples, blues, yellows. It was an incredible process that went really, really quite deep. You know, here's an example of one of these pieces of cloth that they dyed. And what was really important about the Tyrian purple at this time is that these dyes didn't fade with age in the same way that others dyes did. And in fact, when they got wet, they tended to get darker. So one of the reasons they were so prized was for this. They maintained their vibrancy through many, many, many generations, right? So this is a bunch of the different shades that they were able to reproduce in the laboratory, you know? So you can see various blues and pinks and purples, right? Now, Ryan, you sent me this, and this is sort of discussing all of the various chemical compounds that are coming from these murex shells. Did you want to talk about this?
Yeah, it's actually quite simple. So I think the best thing to do is get your head around what the actual animal is using this stuff for. So in lots of mollusks and cephalopods, which are like snails and octopi and squid and things like this, they've got underneath where there's a shell, particularly, what you'll see on a squid in that, you know, a squid kind of has a fleshy shell behind it. So at the peak of that, there's this little gland, and that secretes a substance that actually is thick and oozy. And it, in the main part, for both male and female, it gets rid of all the sediment that builds up in the what are they called? Gills. So yeah, it kind of sticks, and it's got antibacterial and because if your gills get infected, that's your whole system, and it's like with lungs, the insides of your body's exposed to some extent.
I was also reading they shoot this stuff out to protect their young as well and to ward off predators, kind of like a squid ink.
A squid has like a modified version of this same thing that makes it more so, but the murex snail particularly has these variety of capabilities that it adds a few chemicals here and there to that base substance and does lots of miraculous things with it, mostly for the female to put over its eggs. So if anything goes crazy, if it's in polluted water, the eggs don't get cancerous little growths on there. They're generally antibacterial, anti-inflammatory. They just look after the eggs. And so you can see here that it's a brominated indole, which you'll find in many drugs, that we use today. So these are all, with the addition of certain molecules, which you can't quite see here, it looks like oxygen and carbon and stuff like that. But you suddenly get these many myriad drugs that have lots of different properties from just a simple base.
Wow.
And, I mean, you've got things on there that will kill cells. They're particularly attracted to things like leukemia cells and things like this. So they seem very old and very targeted. And quite clever from building from these base brominated indole structures.
So, Dion, I know that you've dug into some of the drug stuff. Do you want to speak on some of the bromo indole stuff from your perspective and what you know?
Well, they're making a few different wild analogs out of it. Now, there's a term analog. People heard of DMT, dimethyltryptamine. They're making what's called a 5-bromo DMT. They're also making something that's called bromo dragonfly, which is that's actual street drug, like at raves and stuff. One of those experimental ones that people are taking called bromo dragonfly.
Sounds Russian.
Yeah, and they call it the dragonfly because of the shape. Like if you go to the corner top left, you can kind of see you can make these different shapes, and one of them looks like a dragonfly, the actual bromo. It ain't on this picture, but it gives you an idea of how they came up with the term dragonfly, because it's the shape of the structure resembles a dragonfly. And people posit that it not only has DMT, but MAOI, which is used in conjunction with DMT. yeah. And it depends on different ones. Now in ancient Egypt,
basically, sorry, just to interject quickly, monoamine oxidase inhibitor is present in your body, and it helps you to break down things like natural DMT quickly, because these things are neurotransmitters, so you need to be able to process them quickly, and so you should, because it's your body and these are your chemicals. You better be good at processing them. Sorry.
No, and what he's saying, and what it is, when you take the MAOI, it makes it so your body doesn't kick it out, and you can have fun with that DMT for a lot longer, and it'll stay in your body. Then you can have that psychedelic or religious experience or entheogenic experience that people are having. But part of it is not just what it does by itself. It's when it's compounded and used with other ingredients together. People talk about dying, but it's also used as a contraceptive. It was used in sexual functions, some abortives. Even in Egypt, they were combining it with acacia, crocodile dung, and part of it deals with lactic acid and pH stuff. I'm not a chemist, so I don't know. We're barely scratching the surface. I'm having to learn it just to study purple dye. But there's a lot to it on what it can do when it's compounded with other ingredients. And not just that, other ingredients that come from the river or from the sea, because there's fresh water and there's salt water. So there's different forms of it. So yeah.
You muted, Snappy.
Yeah, this stuff is so wild, the whole drug thing. Do you have anything to add, Old Boy? Do you know anything about the chemical use of purple by chance, or?
No, I don't know anything about the like any modern uses or anything like that, but I've had a look at what Dioscorides has to say about it, and he's saying as well that it works for like promoting healing of wounds, also cleaning the teeth, And also he says it's fit for checking, which is, you know, stopping or hindering hypersarcoma, which is like a hypersarcoma, which the modern day term is it's to refer to a type of cancer. So they seem to be using it for similar things. Again, I can't comment on how effective. You know, he doesn't write about the effects of it. I haven't found anything where he's recording an actual trial, but you know, this is the general theme of what he's saying. And he also talks about another type of shell called the Kerux, which is another word for a herald. And these are another type of shell that were used for similar things, only he describes them as being more caustic. So it seems like it's got some kind of corrosive, burning.
You say desiccant as well, don't they?
Yeah,
I watched a video recently. Oh, my friend sent me your video. He said because he saw we were doing a purple episode. And I said, "Oh, he's on with us tonight, Old Boy." And then I realised the title of it was Purple Rain. So I think I've stolen your title by accident, giving it to Dion.
Don't worry, it's I've stolen
Great minds,
it.
man.
So good.
You know, I got a question, Old Boy, about the production, because I've looked into it. They use honey. I've seen salt. I've seen urine. I've seen a lot of different things used to break it down.
Yeah, so in the translation I've seen, which is the Onomasticon by Julius Pollux, he describes how they're crushed, so which seems to be how they do it in modern times, where they macerate them in a pestle and mortar, and then he says if you put them into a kettle or a cauldron and boil them up with salt, and that's what he's saying is being done there. And then it says when it's white, but then it turns dark once it's exposed to the heat. And then later on, he says that when it consorts with the sun, it basically enriches the color as well. So he's kind of also saying about how the light exposure also affects the color that is produced from it also.
That's so wild. Crazy.
I have questions though about this burning factor. And so I've watched a few videos in the past of people producing these things, and at no point did they ever say, it blooming hurts me when I make it. The guy's hands seemed quite intact. So I'm wondering, like, if they're mixing it with something else, what do you have any idea? Any medical compounds that they're using? I know Dion obviously just said urine, which can activate things with the alkaline, but do you have any ideas on that?
I don't have any ideas on that other than the fact that Dioscorides just calls it the burning purple. So he refers to it as porphyra, but then he uses an adjective which comes from a verb that means burn, and it's a present adjective. So, sorry, an aorist. So it means just burning purple. That's how it translates. And then when he's describing these other shells, he says they're more caustic. So is it burning? In the case of you put it on your skin, it burns. I mean, that doesn't seem to be the case. Or are they seeing it as it has this quality, this drying quality that's, doing something to the body inside?
So that desiccating quality could be equally allegorical to, it's maybe you've got a strange lump on your arm and you've put it on there and over a few days it's disappeared. Yeah, it's like eating an acid burning. Yeah.
It could be a mythological thing too, right? Because the purple is used to burn off your mortality. That's the poetic phrase that is used in reference to the christening, right? That's what happens in that process. So
I like what Gandhi said. What Gandhi said, an ultraviolet breakdown. Though we do know that the heat helps to break it down. And I'm glad that you added that, Old Boy, because it backs up, the books that I'm pulling from. They talk about it, how it has to be broken down, and then they have to re-dye it. They have to lay it out in the sun, and then they have to re-dye it. They have to wash it and then re-dye it again.
Now, I could say in terms of the caustic properties, they also did use lye, and lye will burn. And there is different forms of even psychoactive lyes, because how you create the process of creating lye itself. I've seen that used as well.
Wow.
No idea.
So at this point, I'm going to do, well, first we're going to show you a couple maps just so you can see the intensity of the purple production during the late Bronze Age. And all of these purple dots that you see here, these are either industry sites that were recorded in the literature or have been confirmed by archaeology. So even you can see here, we have all the way up in the UK and in Ireland and all around Brittany. We have them all across the Mediterranean and, of course, all across the Middle East and in Israel, Lebanon, as we know, right? So just interesting. And then if you compare that to this map that Jevim sent me, you can see here that this shows you the various different Phoenician colonies and Greek colonies and all of their connections, basically, besides the UK, are here, right? It's such a massive interconnected trading network. So it's just really interesting to see. And we have to remember, this is spurred on by the purple. There are many references to wars over the purple trade, Herodotus talks about this. And in fact, one of the things I want to get into now is just some of here's a kind of a description of what was happening by Pliny. And then I'll get into some of the more mythological stuff. But I just wanted to show you this because this is how they were claimed to have processed it back in the day. Now, scholars debate whether or not Pliny actually saw this or if he was just copying from other sources. But this is what he says. The vein already mentioned is then extracted and about a sectarius of salt added to each 100 pounds of material. It should be soaked for 3 days, for the fresher the extract, the more powerful the dye. Then boiled in a leaden vessel. Next, 500 pounds of dye stuff, diluted with an amphora of water, are subjected to an even and moderate heat by placing the vessels in a flue communicating with a distant furnace. Meanwhile, the flesh which nearly adheres to the veins is skimmed off, and a test is made about the 10th day by steeping a well-washed fleece in the liquefied contents of one of the vessels. The liquid is then heated till the color answers to expectations. So they're taking all of these, tons of these live snails, then putting them in a brine salt bath and letting it kind of desiccate while they smash it until they get the color and consistency that they're after. So how many of you guys are familiar with the mythology surrounding the creation of the purple before I start to get into it? Have any of you heard about the story of Hercules and his dog?
I got it off Old Boy.
You talked about this, Old Boy. What were the sources for this that you found?
So there was one source, which was the one which this painting was based on. I can't remember who it was by off the top of my head. However, when I looked into it, I believe the Onomasticon by Julius Pollux, I believe that was a slightly earlier version of the story. So I went with that version just because I wanted to find the earliest one that I could. But yeah, I've done a translation of that one. I've looked into it, and basically he starts off by explaining the myth of Hercules and his dog. And there's a nymph that's following him around called Turos, and the dog finds the shell, and then when Turos sees the lips, she says to Hercules, I'm not going to have you near me unless you can provide for me clothes as beautiful as this dog's lips. So and then it goes on to say, so that is how the purple was discovered according to the Tyrians, and it says that was their version of the story. So it looks like it has a connection possibly to Tyrian Hercules as well. And then he goes into how they catch them and also how they prepare the dye, and it seems very similar to this source that you've just shown. It says, they macerate or crush up the snails, clean out the impurities with water, boil them up with salt, and then it basically says in the presence of heat, that's how the color changes, and it also interacts with the sunlight as well.
Beautiful.
Did you find some
that's
dog welts
amazing.
near you? Sorry, Snappy, go for it.
No, you go ahead, Ryan. I was just
Didn't
saying.
you find
beautiful.
some dog welts, Old Boy, near you, which were contain the purple?
Well, they don't contain exactly the same thing. They're a similar species, and they have the same defense mechanism, and they do produce a similar mucus. However, I don't know if anyone's tried to make a dye out of it. I don't know what color it is. I don't know if it's possible. But when I've read some books on it, they do elicit this response to stress, and they release this mucus. Similar thing.
I do know, and I sent to you in a message at some point, that they actually might even turn the shell purple because it reacts better at colder temperatures. And I have actually seen purple shelled dog whelks myself. And I'm wondering, do you live near the seaside?
Yeah, I used to. Yeah, where I was born, I lived, close to what's called the Solway Firth, right on the west coast of Britain, very close to the Scottish border. So you're looking across a patch of sea where the main rivers are joining the ocean, and you can see Scotland on the other side. You've got a good view of the Isle of Man. And that there was one particularly good day when I was working on a construction site 20 meters up. You could actually see Ireland with the naked eye, very, very faintly. But bear in mind, I was 20 meters up, right on the coast as well. So
cool. I'm wondering if we can find a patch and have a go at making some, even a tiny amount. That'd be interesting.
Still looking at about 10,000 snails, aren't you? Something.
Yeah, we only need to see that it turns purple. We don't need to do anything with it.
Here's the thing: back in ancient times, if depending on your level as a senator, and there was something that's called the censor, depending on the level of purple that your robe was dyed. So back in the day, they would you would get the tip of your robe. Only Caesar had a full purple robe. And even in ancient Egypt, only the pharaohs had the bark, it was called the bark on the Nile, the solar bark, had a full purple cell. It was so expensive. And they had forms of fake purple, let's say. Because purple is purple, but you had to have real purple. Because you can make purple from other plants. And so...
I think, as I remember, the two guilds for red and purple dyes were kept separate, so they couldn't produce purple. That's interesting, that, isn't it? So prized was it, and there's an economic value to it, so they had some playing about with the market there, which is interesting.
So if you're walking through downtown Rome back in the day and you had a little purple on your robe, you get extra privileges. You get your dinner for free. You get to go where you want.
Paparazzi following you.
It's interesting. You say about the different types of purple, because in some of the texts, it is referred to as the true purple as well. So, as you said, there's counterfeit versions, but it's the true purple they're interested in.
Well, imagine if we could get some purple back in ancient times, and you could make something for some blue and red plants and go to town with your purple robes. Who's to say? So you can't have no imposters on an imperator. Even though it has the same root, the same etymological root.
We're talking about going to the seaside to find some snails. I think we should just go to a Roman bathhouse and stick our hands down the toilets.
That's what Old Boy did, right? But Jevim, I saw you wanted to comment. Did you have something to add?
I'm blown away at the montage of everything that is attached to this purple and this history of the purple. And it's like, if you want to really figure out the true history of things, just like Almond said, you just follow the drugs. Well, you got to follow the purple.
And you follow the myths, which is what I wanted to take you guys on here. So I'm going to do a little more of this presentation, and then I'll get you guys feel free to interrupt if you have something to add. So we're talking about this myth that Old Boy brought the source for, the onomasticon. What was it called, Old Boy? Sorry.
Yep, the onomasticon.
Thank you. So the other myth that I found that was related to this has to do with the founding of Tyre itself. So this is a really interesting coin, and it depicts two different mythological stories about the founding of Tyre. So on the bottom here, you can see you have the dog of Melkart getting the snail. Now, this is really important because you used a specific word. You said the Tyrian Hercules. And the Tyrian Hercules is specifically identified by Herodotus as the older version of Heracles from Melkart. He actually goes on a trip to Melkart to find the origins of this myth. And we also have, I think it's Lucan who goes as well. I have a nice description here about the myth. Go ahead, Dion.
I want to interrupt you because that coin was so beautiful. That olive tree is burning. There's animals with the olive tree. It's in between two stones. Now, remember those, Ryan's going to, if we talk about being in between two pillars, I'm sure he could talk about that. Even in biblical stories, Mount Hermon, they got these two pillars. There's a lot going on with this. It gets very deep. Sorry to interrupt you. Keep going.
Sorry, if I could just throw a little tiny bit in there, Snappy, just to do a quick overview of that coin.
Yeah, I have an overview of it from the Dionysica.
I was just literally going to say that there's an above part to it, which is pointing you up to the heavens, which is the two stony pillars in the tree. Then you've got this chthonic underground underworld part with the dog. The dog's very chthonic underworldy, and the snail, which is very under the watery. That's it.
100%. No, that's perfect. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I got this really cool little description here. So this is from this amazing essay by Gabriela Bajovsky. It says, the legend about the ambrosial rocks, which is illustrated on several coins, the literary source for this is found in the Dionysiaca of Nonus from Panopolis, written in the 5th century, but which reflects earlier sources from the 2nd and 3rd centuries, contemporary to our coins. Nonus writes about an imaginary banquet between himself and Melkart, the patron god of Tyr, the synchronistic version of the Greek Heracles, during his visit to the city where the god tells Nonus how Tyr was founded. According to the legend, 2 wandering rocks floated over the sea. One of them was a burning olive tree with an eagle perched on top of it, together with a magic bowl. A snake was entwined around the tree. Both eagle and snake lived in harmony. Melkart ordered the native population to build a ship and follow after the wandering rocks. The god's oracle was to sacrifice the eagle so that the ambrosial rocks would stop wandering, indicating the place for the foundation of the city of Tyr. A variant of this type adds in the lower field the story of the purple color as discovered by Melkart when his dog was bit by a murex shell at the seaside. This is wild to me because this connects this directly to the myth of Prometheus, to the myth of Heracles, and to the myth of Nergal and Ereshkigal. But before I go deeper, does anyone have stuff to add on this? Because I know you guys are all chomping at the bit.
Well, one quick thing is, how does the goddess resurrect Melkart every spring at the ritual? We did an episode on that one, Snappy.
Yep, there's this whole king ritual that happens, right? Well, so there's 2 variations of it. One is done with an idol where the idol is burned. But then there is one where we talked about this. They take the king, they put him through a death ritual where they shave all the hair off his body. They make several incisions on him. They then anoint him in oil, wrap him in a mummy wrap, and then he's gone into a specific death state. Then he's supposed to be, and at the same time he's in this death state, he's also in satyriasis. He has a massive erection. He is then mounted by a priestess who makes love to him. And if he doesn't wake up, she has to whip him and beat him. And the idea is upon orgasm, he's supposed to come back from the dead and awaken. But sometimes the king would die, right? Is that how it went, Dion?
And part of it, the purple is used as to get the priapus. The purple is used as part of the lubrication. As Ryan explained, it's already a lubricant itself on the snail. I didn't know that's where the snail uses it for, because that's what Ryan said. Well, what does the snail use it for? Not what do we use it for? What does the snail use it for? And if you follow that lead, well, then sure, you're going to use it for venereal disease as a lubricant, an abortificant, a lot of different reasons. It's already built into its structure.
Do you have any thoughts on this, Old Boy?
Just the balls was quite interesting to me as well. You know, it mentions the ball in particular. You're kind of thinking about, you know, other texts where these balls have been used for containing, you know, certain ingredients. That's just where my mind's going there. And these rocks as well. That's very interesting to me. Although I'm curious, basically.
Yeah, there's a whole cosmology there. I think that's really caught me as well. I think that's the two wandering poles. That's what I think that is. Yeah.
100%.
There's a tree between them as well.
So I just wanted to add that later on, she connects this to the polar myths, okay, to several different polar myths in Phoenicia and in Greece. And that this also has to do with these lineage rites that this author does in this particular thing here. But I also wanted to add that Lucan went also to Tyre, and he connects this temple to the Tyrian hero, right, in Syria. And we know that the Tyrian hero is Heracles, right, is Melkart. Here's a picture of what this temple to Melkart looks like today. But I wanted to read this is also from the Dionysiaca and from that essay. It says, the historical sources describe a Phoenician spring celebration that took place within the sacred sanctuary of Melkart, known as the Agarus, or resurrection of the god. The celebration is apparently depicted on a stone bowl dated to the 4th century BCE found in Sindon. During the ceremony, the image of the god was burnt, which was brought about its resurrection. These features remind us about the motif of the phoenix bird, but especially recall the burning olive tree from the story of Nonus and Achilles Tacitus. Melkart's destiny is connected to the act of renovation by means of fire. Interestingly, one of Nonus's names for the god is the Lord of Fire. So we got an olive tree that's on fire. We got two poles, right? We got a snake and an eagle. This is Promethean magic. This is bringing us right back to the story of Prometheus and Medea, to Diana and Lucifer. This is like wild stuff, right?
I do have one thing to say, and that is, look, all humans, no matter what you're doing, we are flesh and blood and bone and a brain and a nervous system. And a lot of these magical arts, you know, even into the modern day, a lot of it's about concentration. How much attention can you give to something? How good is your nervous system? Can you think quickly? Is your throat chakra open? Can you orate easily? You know, there's a studied refinement of your internal system, and that is what these trees are getting to. It's not just the pole of the earth and then the stars above you. It's you. You are the tree of life. It's your nervous system.
Well, I think this is also what's happening in this story, right? You have Hercules building a bridge between two poles and founding and building a city. He's uniting the masculine and the feminine in the city, right? And this is also connected to the story of his apotheosis, okay? Because in the stories, when you look at his apotheosis, Hercules can't die. Okay, especially after he finishes the curse of Hera, after Medea cures him. He can't ever be defeated. He's now the greatest warrior who ever lived. So how do they defeat him? A love of his drugs him, gives him a poison, right? And then he is burned upon a pyre. And through the burning, he transcends and achieves apotheosis. Now, this also, as we just saw, happens with Melkart. The statue of Melkart is burnt in an offering, and he's said to transcend into the heavens, right? And be reborn. We also see this, for those of you who are familiar with other types of mythologies, in the story of Nergal. One thing that blew my mind is Melkart means Lord of the City. Nergal means Lord of the City. But it gets more wild because Lord of the City for Nergal is actually a euphemism about the city of the underworld and being the Lord of the dead. And in his story, he goes to fight. Are you familiar with Nergal at all? Sorry?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, he's essentially Mars. He's the dunghill cock. He's something of a mix of a few gods, but he's like an underworld Mars. He's this masculine potency that that gets things done, but he's your ticket to the underworld, essentially. But
He
carry
reminds
on,
us
I'm
a
listening
lot.
what you say.
He reminds us a lot of Heracles. Heracles goes to the underworld, is a drunken buffoon. He literally destroys the place, right?
Nobody likes him.
Right? And then he takes off to the point where later on in Frogs, when Dionysus goes down, he dresses up like Heracles so no one will mess with him. But it backfires because they all see him as Heracles, and Heracles destroyed the place, right? So anyway, but with Nergal, what's so interesting, right, is in the story, he gets in a fight with Ereshkigal at a feast, and there's all this weird sexual implication. But she banishes him to the underworld, and he has to go through the trial of going to the city in the underworld and coming back. That's the only way that this can end. And in some of the versions of the story, right, they go down to the underworld, they fight in the underworld, and they have a truce, and then they wind up becoming lovers, right? And just like the story we see with the Kori and Pluton, you have this Nergal goes back for 6 months of the year. From the underworld, he rises back up to the heavens, right? And if you look too, we have Nergal with this magic dog here, Nergal with a club, and who's this? A woman with a massive tower on her head, enthroned, surrounded by lions, right?
Yeah. You've also got the scorpion and the bull horns, which are signs for the opening of the gates of winter, of autumn and spring. So that's, you're going into the underworld now. It's showing you where you are. And I would say as well, you said the dog, that's actually 3 dogs.
Yeah.
So you've got Cerberus there, Kerberos.
100% with the snake for the tail. And you have the bull as well.
So could I just put in one thing that I think is really important, really keeps coming up here, Snappy? So, sorry to interject, but as I was saying about the nervous system, this chakra stuff that we keep hearing about, that we think is relatively new age, lots of things bolted on. It's not. It's really ancient. Can you see the staff there with the different chakra on there? These things aren't new. They're really old. And as with the olive tree,
how many circles, Ryan? How many circles on the staff?
Probably 7, mate. Let's have a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There you go. Yeah, always 7. And so, and what it is these guys, you can see in Nei Gong and lots of the internal alchemical arts that are still being practiced in China and secretly practiced by real alchemists in the West, but you don't meet many of them, and they're very secretive. The few I've glanced at, they were very reticent to tell me anything or show me much, but you can tell. You just walk into their nervous system field and you can feel a difference. And this is what they were doing. So the drugs, the meditations, the philosophies are all really to clean out and release your nervous system to be able to do, as they saw it, special things, real magic.
Right. And the other key here from an alchemical and a hermetical standpoint to remember is as above, so below, right? So this is not just a chthonic myth, but it is a solar myth. And what I mean by this is that you can also reflect this within the sky. This is not just the underworld, Dionysus, Nergal that we're talking about, or Prometheus. It's also Orion. And you see the same reflection in the story of Orion ascending to the stars and drawing down the Pleiades, right? You have the 7 stars on this path here as well. So there's always 2 versions of the story, right? Ascending to the stars or going to the underworld, but it's essentially the same thing, right? As above, so below. What I wanted to point out here, which is so wild, is that in Herodotus's description of going to the temple of Melkart in Tyre, he describes how there are these 2 pillars, the pillars of Heracles. Really, the word he uses is stela, but it's become that beautiful image we see in the tarot, represented everywhere between the 2 pillars, okay? In Herodotus, he says it's between 2 stela. One stela is bronze, one stela is fire. And I believe that this is about the anointing oil protects you from being cut or being burned, right? It is armor. And in the middle between the 2 stelae is supposed to be the goddess herself. And sometimes these stelae are described as rings, okay? And the goddess is in between 2 rings, okay? And this is from the actual temple here. You have two poles and then the goddess in the middle. And then at the top here is at the top here, right? And at the top here is actually an inscription that directly relates to Nonus. So there's even speculation that Nonus may have seen this, or at least read accounts of people writing about this. Okay. So one scholar I was reading connected that image to this image of Ereshkigal, right? If you look in her hands, she's holding two rings, right? And she is the force between the two poles, right? The last thing I wanted to do is talk about this really cool story, because I believe this all connects to empire magic and empire building. So on one hand, we've just gone through Heracles building the Phoenician Empire through this purple magic, creating this city, uniting two poles, and bringing in this goddess power, right? Hera, enthroning her in the city. That's what the rite is all about. Now we're going to see him do a similar thing for the Scythians. This comes to us from Herodotus, Book 4, 8-10, and is said to happen right after. So after this event, before he goes over to the Scythians. Anyway, so this is what I'm going to read for you guys. It says, "This is what the Scythians say about themselves and the country north of them. But the story told by the Greeks who live in Pontus is as follows. Heracles, driving the cattle of Geryones, came to this land, which was then desolate, but is now inhabited by the Scythians. Geryones lived west of the Pontus, settled in the island called by the Greeks of Erythea, on the shores of the ocean near Gadira, outside the pillars of Heracles. As for ocean, the Greeks say that it flows around the whole world where the sun rises, but they cannot prove that this is so. Heracles came from there to the country now called Scythia, where encountering wintry and frosty weather, he drew his lion's skin over him and fell asleep. While he slept, his mares, which were grazing, yoked to the chariot, were spirited away by divine fortune. When Heracles awoke, he searched for his mares, visiting every part of the country, until at last he came to the land called the Woodland. And there he found in a cave a creature of double form that was half maiden and half serpent. Above the buttocks, she was a woman, below them a snake. When he saw her, he was astonished and asked her if she had seen his mares straying. She said that she had seen them and would not return them to him before he had intercourse with her. Heracles did, in hope of this reward. But though he was anxious to take the horses and go, she delayed returning them, so that she might have Heracles with her for as long as possible. At last she gave them back, telling him, 'These mares came, and I kept them safe here for you, and you have paid me for keeping them, for I have 3 sons by you. Now tell me, what am I to do when they are grown up? Shall I keep them here, since I am queen of this country, or shall I send them away to you?' Thus she inquired, and then it is said Heracles answered, 'When you see the boys are grown up, do as follows, and you will do rightly. Whichever of them you see bending this bow, wearing this,' it's supposed to be girdle. In the original, it's girdle. 'Wearing this girdle, so make him an inhabitant of this land. But whoever falls short of these accomplishments that I require, send him away out of the country. Do so, and you shall yourself have comfort, and my will shall be done.'"
Wow. That sounds deeply occulted, I must say. So the fish lady and I'm glad she still has buttocks though.
Well, she's said to be in the Scythian texts, the snake mother with many legs, many snakes. This corresponds to a famous French image that many people will know, the Melusine, or the icon of Starbucks, right?
Yeah. So Melusine, especially in Jungian thought, is almost like, you know, when you're falling asleep and you have snatches from the subconscious, and maybe you forget it a minute later, but you're like, oh, that's really deep and profound, and then it's gone. That's Melusine. She's slippery. She gets away. I think somebody like Heracles. Go on, Snappy. It's a half-formed myth that you'll correct me on anyway. So just.
I just wanted to say, this brings us right into the Ammon world, right? This is what Ammon is looking for. This is what Ammon is about, this kind of empire ritual magic. And you can see reflections of this in so many different other myths. Okay, take this story, compare it to the story of Circe and Odysseus. Okay, you have this lovemaking to produce heirs to establish a kingdom. You have his men being taken and imprisoned, but they're animals, you know. The mares of Heracles are probably women who are transformed, you know, like there's a lot of weirdness going on. Also, look at the story of Lot and his daughters. You have this love potion that knocks him out. You have an incestuous or a taboo love affair that results in the birth of a kingdom in a nation. Another dragon that we all know and love is Charles Leland. In the Gospel of Witches, Aradia, he talks about the same thing, how Lucifer has to drug Diana has to drug Lucifer to rape him in order to create a new king lineage. And it all comes back to this purple. It all comes back. Yeah, it's solar, it's alchemical, it's literal. When we think about the myths, you got to remember it's always many meanings, right?
Oh, absolutely. Polysemic. There's a great word, polysemi, which means many layered, like, you know, many symbols, many. And I think the best stories kind of coalesce. Yeah, they mean certain things, and they're retold, and they're just kind of perfected and sharpened as they travel through time. Sometimes lost, you know, sometimes the meaning's lost, but other times the collective unconscious, as well as wizardly types, kind of perfect these stories into these many layers.
Well, I will just add to this. If we look at, like, you can see a lot of this still survives in the Indian tradition, specifically within the aesthetic traditions. You see this approach to myth, which is about the perception of beauty and beautiful images and gaining meaning. You read the story many, many times to gain new metaphors, to gain new connections. And the more you engage with these myths, the more profound the story becomes. And this is what they believe, that by engaging with these myths, you come to universal realization. The perception of beauty will bring you to the one and free you, you know? So there's this understanding that these myths have to be multi-layered. They're told again and again in new cultural contexts, and they're constantly reviving, and they have to be both solar, chthonic, and now in our present, right? They got to connect all of these poles. And truly magical stories will have this ability to really push you towards beauty. But sorry for the rant.
I wanted to go back to the snake and the eagle. I'm like, okay, Orphic Vox, okay. Now, in Orphic Vox tone, would that be a symbol as like a drug reference, or could it be like eagle as above and the snake as below?
I think this is dealing with the divine twins. We see this divine twinning. So you always got to remember that there's this, basically, the Trinity is far older, and it comes out of these ancient myths. And the Trinity really is, you have the Great Mother, the Chaos Gap, Night, okay, however you want to refer it. And then you have the twins. You have, Diana and Lucifer, right? And the thing with the twins is that they're perpetually in love and perpetually at war, right?
Yin and yang.
And it depends. They're in this constant battle. And the goal of the mother is to bring them together to harmonize and to try to get them, but it's a constant struggle, and it's always the cyclical upgrading, right? And it's that love and war thing that we're constantly seeing again and again.
And I think getting that balance, as I read in those stories, that we're talking about, that myth, it's that the building of the city is the building of the temple, is the polishing of your own stones, is you've sorted your morals out, you've sorted your health out, right thinking, right action, right, all that stuff. Right on.
It's coming together in community and in harmony to build something greater, right? It's uniting. The city can only exist when you unite the masculine and the feminine, right? It's an ancient myth, right? You want to build the tower. You want to create the massive phallus to draw down the Great Mother, to connect the two worlds, right? And you can only build the tower when you unite these forces. A city is not just a masculine enterprise. It can't be, What do you think about all this, Old Boy? Since you've been so deep in the sources and the mythology, what's your takeaway before we get into your presentation?
I was just going to say, obviously, as you've already said, the Promethean element is there with the eagle. The eagle that's sent to torment Prometheus for stealing the fire, hiding it in a fennel stalk, and then using it to shape mankind. Although when you look at the lexicon, shape doesn't mean he's literally getting the earth and molding them. It seems to be a reference to education from what I can remember. So it's definitely seems to be along the lines of what you were saying. The Promethean element's definitely there. You have the serpent element as well, with the rites too. So yeah, I can completely see that.
Yeah, it's wild stuff to think about, and it makes me think too, right? Like the Prometheus story too is always about this idea of you've been given all of the power in the universe. Now it's about you taking responsibility, learning how to wield it, learning how to upgrade. And it seems to me like within the ancient pagan sources, what has been lost in the Christianization is that these cycles are about that ever fine-tuning and refining, trying to create an ever more perfect city, a more perfect harmony, and to bring about this kind of unity and to get over tyranny. What do you guys think?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, in a lot of these cities, they have the name of the goddess or god that protects the city as well. So it seems to be completely linked. That you get to this point of civilization, as you say, when you get people working together and you get that sense of community going. As Amon says about how democracy was founded, going back to all these, seafaring groups that were traveling around everywhere, and eventually that's led to democracy, and Athena, the wisdom coming out of the mind of Zeus, the head of Zeus.
I was going to bring her up because she's the perfect metaphor for this. Because when you go into the sources, right, she's intersexed. She's not specifically feminine, right? And the story is that Zeus has the vision, right, that his daughter is going to his child is going to overthrow him by his twin, Metis, his feminine side. So he consumes his feminine side, but then his feminine side, through the power of reason, bursts forth through his head with Hephaestus's aid. And then what does Athena do? She is the builder of the city, and she establishes the courts of law. I immediately think of the Oresteia, right? The Oresteia ends with Athena calming the Furies by taking the hit, by taking her shield and being in defense and allowing them to get their anger out on her instead of on Orestes, and then that turns them into the Eumenides. So there's this whole thing about you got to rise together so that you can build your defensive standpoint, and you can force people to, or not force, but you can end the cycle of violence by rising above the violence,
It's trade, working together and working amicably and trying to have that. Well, there's a famous documentary, isn't there, where there's a pencil, and then what it takes to make the pencil. Like, one person couldn't make that. You got to fell the wood, get the carbon, get the transport it. There are so many different things to make that one pencil. Like, one man couldn't do it because all the parts are from all over the world for a start. And yeah, to form together, form like Voltron, and come together and make something excellent.
So well said. Dion, do you have anything to add before we get into Old Boy's presentation? What are your thoughts?
Like, subscribe, share, leave a comment. I told you, go to Ryan 7, go to Old Boy's channel, Occult Exploration. Yep, Jevin, you got to like and subscribe. There's more content to come. We're barely getting started. The party's only getting started, folks. So, hold on, put your seatbelts on, because Old Boy's about to take you for a ride.
What about you, Jevin? Any comments before Old Boy gives us his presentation on the etymology?
Oh my goodness, I think, well, I'm with Dion. We are literally just getting started. I'm just getting geared up, digging in some old books about the purple, and then like here we are, we're just going to bounce off of each other. And And audience, please look. If it looks like we're bouncing off each other and ideas and everything, that's because we've been around each other long enough. We trust each other's resources. So I hope you enjoy everybody's input because you're in great company.
All right, amazing. I'm going to pull you up here, Old Boy, if you want to take over. Oh, you're accidentally muted there, bud.
You're talking Pollux.
There we go. Thanks for pointing that out. So I just thought basically that I was going to bring these sources that I'd been using for the last few videos. So this is the Onomasticon by Julius Pollux. And I've just highlighted a few of the words here. So as you can see at the top, it says Historia peri porphyras. So, you know, that's concerning the purple. Porphyras is our purple. And then it says about the nymph here, the nymph that follows Hercules. And it's this word here, apeto. So if we look at apeto, it comes from epomai. And you can see here it means heed or obey, accord, be in keeping with, or be attendant. And what the text says is it says, the Tyrians say that Heracles was loved by the native nymph. Indeed, the nymph had the name Touros. And it says she was following with Heracles and dog against ancient custom after all. And I'm just showing that the word follow, it isn't as simple as she's just literally walking around following him for the sake of it. It says, you know, heeding or obeying, keeping or being in accord with, be attendant to. So that's got me thinking of why it's saying it's against ancient custom. Is it because, you know, it's a masculine? Is it a masculine cult? Is that why she's going against this ancient custom, you know, following him? And then we're going to get into, you've talked about the dogs before. And what it says here is, but you know that the dogs went together with the heroes to the point of assembly. And we have this other word here, this sun eiseyasan. And as you can see here, it says enter or go into, enter into a treaty of the chorus or actors coming up upon the stage, entering, or it says here, enter on an office such as the new king. So again, these dogs, they're not just following in, you know, like a dog would just follow its owner. You know, there's something more going on here. And as we've seen before, you know, Amon showed this before, that dog simply, it's also a metaphor. And as you can see here, it says a metaphor of persons, watchdog or guardian. And then number 3 here, Roman numeral number 3, it says in mythology of the servants, agents or watchers of the gods. And I thought I would just highlight these as well, because this is quite interesting, where it says Pan is the Kuon of Cybele. And it also says used of Hecate in Mithraic worship here. So you can see how the analogy is working.
What was that of Cybele, sorry?
It just says Pan is the Kuon of Cybele. Can you see it there under Roman numeral number 3? I've just highlighted it.
That's wild. I love to see that. Sorry.
No, that's great. But, you know, I just thought I would highlight that it's not simply a case of Hercules having these dogs following him around, because we can see they're a metaphor of servants, agents, or watchers of the gods. And obviously, when we've looked at the word for following, it isn't just following around. You know, it's related to this to coming into the point of assembly.
Can I ask you before you continue, what is your perception of the nymph and the dog? Do you think this is related to the muses?
I mean, the kind of what I'm getting from this text is where it's saying, you know, she followed him against ancient custom. So I'm thinking, you know, are they talking about the cult here? Is it the cult of Heracles? Is it a masculine cult? Why is she following him around against custom? You know, that's what the route that my mind was going down with this text. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I keep thinking about this idea, just that, you know, we have to remember that by this time, you know, Heracles is representing this Olympian supplanter, right? that is supplanting the chthonic other. So I'm wondering if this nymph could be a reference to that earlier matriarchal religion, right? That is influencing Heracles. But your suggestion is equally as important, because we know that Heracles does have a pederast bent to his cult with Ganymede and Iolus and several other male lovers. He does have female lovers as well, but the male lovers tend to be more important in terms of the mystery, right? So you're right. It could, I don't know, it could go either way in that direction.
I think bearing
I
in
have a
mind that
question. I'm
I was just going
sorry.
to say, one sec, Jevin. I think if you bear in mind that these drugs were primarily used by midwives and such, that might fill you in. You know, that it was a matriarchal cult, and maybe he has taken it over.
And as well,
It just seems to me as well. Has anybody really come across these things being psychedelic? That's something I've not really hit upon. I mean, that would be a secret, but it seems to be part of a cocktail to me.
My question was going back to Pan. Pan is because we have an audience that doesn't speak the Greek. So Pan is the what to the Sibyl?
It says the Kuon dog of Kybele.
Okay.
So it's just showing
Okay.
how the analogy's being used.
Okay, so it's basically saying that Pan is the dog of Kybele, right?
Yeah, and that dog
Okay.
means a servant or an agent.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, any other questions? You know, before we move on, are you all happy with that?
Cool.
Okay, so then next I had a look at the Demeteria Medica by Dioscorides. So this, you can see I've just underlined here at the bottom section of the page there in the brackets, periporphyras. So that's our porphyra again, concerning the purple. And just bear with me while I get my notes for. I've got my translation notes from when I did it. So the words that I've highlighted here are porphyra, caesa, and if I go into the lexicon here, so this was the LSJ analysis. So you can see again, porphyra is your purple fish, your murex, and caesa, that's an aorist active participle of kaio. And then over here, you can see kaio. It means kindle, set on fire, or burn. And you would translate the aorist participle as burning. So that's where it's referred to as burning purple. Now, apologies if I'm flipping backwards and forwards here, because I just want to keep going to the first word here. And what I'll do is I'll just read out the translation of this purple. So it says, the burning purple possesses a desiccating potency, is a detersive of teeth, is fit for checking overgrown flesh, which is your upersarcomatone, which is your hypersarcoma. And then it says, and is a cleanser of wounds, causing them to scar over. So I'm just going to go into some of these words now. So the first one here was xeranticane, which is... you can see here, xeranticane, causing to dry up. And it possesses a hei dunamin, the power or ability to dry. So that's where you get your desiccating potency. And then with reference to the teeth, it's smekdicane odontone, which means a purgative of the teeth. So it seems like they were using it to also clean teeth as well, which is interesting. And then this is the word upersarcomatone, and it says catastalticane, and you can see the word here from the LSJ, catastalticane, which is the top one here. It says fitted for checking. And then the upersarcomatone is overgrown flesh, and in modern terms, a hypersarcoma is a type of cancer there as well. So that's what it's saying with regards to the burning purple. And then as well, what's interesting here is just on the right here. Now, this is with reference to burnt wool, because he also writes, and I'm just going to flip back to this second text. He also writes here about burnt wool, and it's just at the bottom where my mouse icon's circling. This is where the passage begins. And he says here, you'll see thalassias porphyras. And what he's saying there is they're also burning wool. That's sea purple. So thalassias is of the sea, and porphyras is the purple. And now at the bottom here, what's interesting is he's talking.
Can I interrupt you 1 second? Do you think that they are referencing wool, or are they referencing that? Because when I was looking into the Minoans, they were harvesting the sea beard stuff that was also used. Sometimes they would turn it into silks or fabrics. Sometimes and it was also a part of this creation of the purple dye. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, in this text, he says wool that is sea purple is also burnt as well. So it seems like they're using wool, but they're also using wool that's been dyed purple also. So that's just what this text is saying.
So you don't think it's actually the sea beard itself? It's wool fabric.
It seems to be, yeah, because he's talking about how they card the wool, which is just a term for how they get the fibers to stay together. You know, how they make a sheet of the wool by carding it. So he's actually talking about this wool that's been carded and prepared, and then it's soaked, and then they lay it over a cauldron in strips, and they burn it. And then what's interesting here is the bit that I've underlined at the bottom that says plunetai de eista ophthalmica. Now, if I just go over to my lexicon here. So plunetai is a present indicative verb, and it means wash or clean. And then ophthalmica is of or for the eyes. So basically what they're saying is the substance that they get from this burnt wool is bathed into the eyes. So I've put there that the native translation is saying something along the lines of the substance is bathed into the ocular things, or because he's using just a word which means of or for the eyes. So it seems to be that they're rinsing it into the eyes as well. And I just thought that was interesting because we've obviously seen other medical texts which relate to being a clear route of getting medication into the body.
It really makes me think. Just the other day, I was chatting with Gandhi, and we found this in Marcus Aurelius. He uses it as a metaphor, but he says you must be diligent, like someone who uses the purple dye in their eyes and has to rinse repeatedly. It's like, wow, wild stuff. It turns up in weird places.
Yeah, it's certainly out there, though, isn't it? You know, there's multiple sources which talk about this.
So I have a question for everybody. Has this been missed, or has this been hidden?
Hidden. I vote hidden. Absolutely.
I think it's clear that I think it's pretty clear that it's been hidden, because you see so much of the purple it's like hidden within plain sight kind of stuff, you know. As always. You know, it's too abundant to be here. What I wonder is, what I wanted to ask you guys is, what do you think about the connections to like, we all know we've done all this talk about connections to purple and royalty, but the other connection in art, in symbolism, is death. Purple is often related to death. What do you think is the connection here? Do you think this is about that mystery right still?
Yeah, it's mysticism.
Or was purple also used as a poison? I don't know.
Yeah, well, you know, death, poison, taken in a not quite literal sense. These are pointers towards mysticism, and purple is the color of mysticism. Even within that bracket of being a royal color, these old kings were shaman priests and such, and the connection between the church and the state, as it were, is one props up the other. One gives acquiescence to the other.
100%.
To me as well, it seems like they're always referencing that this purple, you know, this deep dark color is like dried blood. you know, and they often reference, you know, the deep, dark blood red colours as well, which
Coagulated blood.
make me
Coagulated
say-
blood.
yeah, which makes me think of, you know, the underworld and obviously death. That, you know, there's a connection there with death to me as well.
There's so
have a
much
simple
weirdness
one.
like this.
So
ahead.
it's the back of your eyes. It's the back of your eyes. Close your eyes, and it's a purpley reddy color. You know.
You know,
Up
I
against
got
the
a
sun, yes.
quick question before I'd like to say something. Say the word phosphorus again. Purple. How do you say that?
Porphyra.
Oh, okay. Porphyrogenesis is the term for to be born of purple. There's Byzantine emperors. It was a term for their children, as well as the birthing chamber at Bal-Leon, which is a combination of bull and lion, a temple in Turkey, where they had a birthing chamber with the porphyra. Say it again.
Porphyra.
Porphyra, which is also a stone that comes from a quarry in Egypt, which Romans were really fascinated by and would bring it back to Rome, and they would carve into it the purple stone. And so there's a birthing chamber in Byzantine times. The emperors you would be born in that chamber of purple stone, but to be born of purple also meant the purple was used in the gynecological functions of the midwives. So to be born of purple, the vulva would be purple, because we know this. You're talking about the eyes and the vulva and different orifices of the body would be stained purple in ancient Christian mystery sects. If anybody would like to speak on that.
Well, a lot of this has to do with, we got to remember, when you're dealing with gynecological medicine, the single biggest issue is bleeding. Okay. And anything that's an anti-inflammatory or is going to be dealing with this is going to be used for this. And we have many, many references of this, right? With these medical applicator devices that administer oils or creams to inside of the vulva and uterus, right? To stop bleeding or to help bring forth the child. Like this is primordial. We got to remember, okay, like before the invention of modern medicine, 1 in like 4 women were dying from childbirth due to bleeding.
And there was massive bruising. I mean, I had natural childbirth, no drugs, y'all. Massive bruising all over. Yeah.
Wow. And you know, so we always have to remember that all of this is going back to that magic, right? It's always going back to the women's magic, because they were the ones who needed it most and needed to be able to control these things, to balance the hormones. We're talking about the purple. It balances your hormones and regulates your cycles, right? It helps with the inflammation. It encourages the sex rights. So it's doing a bunch of stuff. It's just not what people want. People look at the drugs and they get, oh, we want the DMT. We want the sexy psychedelic. But this is the part of the right that's about the childbirthing, the creation of a new line. This is going to give you the erection, the satyriasis, and this is, you know, that's going to make all that possible.
Well, they're using the whole sex as a channel thing, and the sex to bring you to a climax, to make the ritual and the theater of it all come to a climax equally. You know, these things need a crescendo. That's how events get into your soul, and that's what we're trying to change. We're trying to change the fundamental of yourself by having these mystical, otherly experiences that are peak experiences.
Right,
so
and it's no surprise to me that at the end of that, when we were talking about the Melkart ritual, the end of the Melkart ritual, right? He's dead. He's wrapped up like a mummy. He's got a massive erection. It ends when he orgasms and she knocks him back into consciousness, and he rises back from the dead through this love-making process, right? It's truly wild stuff. But Old Boy, do you have anything to add? Do you have more of this presentation here? Sorry, I didn't want to veer off too far.
I've got some interesting early Christian sources as well. So
Beautiful. Just let's see it.
Jump into them very quickly. I'm just going to show you Revelation 17. Obviously, we've all seen this. She's wearing the porphyrun. So where my cursor is here, it says porphyrun kai kokinon, which is the scarlet and purple. And I just want to show that because this next source that I've got here, it's from the Proto-Evangelion of James. Now, this section here, it says, the priest said, choose for me by lot who shall spin the gold and the white and the fine linen and the silk and the blue and the scarlet and the true purple. So, and this is, and it says, and the true purple and the scarlet fell to the lot of Mary. And that's really interesting because obviously in Revelation 17, the lady riding on the beast is clothed in purple and scarlet as well. Now, if you can see the Greek text below there, and the word for fine linen, which I've underlined, is bousinon. Now, let's just take a look at what the LSJ says of bousinon. Made of bousos, and then it says sindon bousos, fine linen bandage used for mummy, for wound. And then you've also got a connection to purple underneath as well, Roman numeral number 2.
That is beautiful. Oh, wow.
Could you say that word that starts with the beta again, please?
Yeah, bousinon.
I also just wanted to point out that we have the mother-whore dichotomy here on full display as well, right? You've got Mary is Aphrodite Pandemos, and then, Lady Babylon is Aphrodite Pandemos, and Mary here is Aphrodite Urania, right? Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And as well, this is also the text where later on, where the midwife comes to check Mary and her hand burns.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Yeah, this is that text.
How does her hand burn? What does she do to get her hand burnt?
I believe she is checking about being pregnant. So
Palpitating.
Yeah.
These are simple gynecological functions that a midwife does to feel where the baby's at. Is it breech? Is the pregnancy okay? Do we need to speed it up? Do we need to slow it down? Is there blood?
Check the dilation.
Yeah. And her hand burnt. Her fingers started burning because of that
is
purple.
That a sensation?
To be born
is
of
that
purple.
A sensation? No. Sorry, I was going to say, is that a sensation, or because there seems to be a lot of debate whether there is a burning sensation at all, or whether it just has, in inverted commas, burning properties. It seems to be. I think
burning
we're
off
missing
your
something.
Immortality.
I know.
That too. I think we're missing something in its preparation somehow.
I know that after my dilations got so far, the midwife moved it. I don't know what happened, but it hurt. It burned. Could or could not be related. I don't know. But that just come to mind is how when you move your cervix, after you get so far, I was like an 8 or a 9. She just moved me on to a 10 and that burned.
I just also think like it could be just a warming gel, right? A lot of different creams could provide a warming sensation that would be fairly mild and would go away, that some may comment on and others may not, you know? And this is a very common thing with a lot of medicated creams and whatnot. Like any of them that are going to provide some kind of pain relief, you're going to feel a certain bit of numbing. So that could be what they're describing as well, right?
Yeah. But it seems to be sometimes they have it, sometimes they don't.
True.
And it's where, you know, sometimes it's metaphorical, sometimes it doesn't seem to be. It's just a strange dichotomy. Again, I think it's something in the preparation, or perhaps at that point it's already passed through a body, and perhaps the body itself is what's making it burn.
Or as
perhaps
well,
there's some, perhaps there's some chemical added onto it. Excuse me, sorry.
Sorry, bud. I looked as though I was trying to butt in there. Sorry, mate.
No, it's all right. I'd finished anyway.
I was just going to say about the metaphorical aspect of it, you know, about people being conceived in these rites, and how they're described as being, you know, sons of God, and, you know, born in amongst that fire. You know when you read Euripides' Bacchae about Dionysus being born from Semele, you know, and how Zeus pulls him out of this. How is it translated in the Greek again? It's something along the lines of from the burning lightning or something like that. You know, how he's pulled out of that fire, and I'm wondering if there's a connection there as well. You know, how it's metaphor essentially.
It's so great too, because Nonus, we know, was also talking about Melkart that I brought up earlier, right? That's connecting us to this Tyrian purple. And it again is this apotheosis rite where they're taking the Eidolon and they're burning it, and it's transcending to the stars, you know?
Nonus. You know, you brought up Nonus a few times today, the Dionysica. In there, I know there's one story of Midas. You know about King Midas, the Midas touch, where things turn to gold. And he actually turns his daughter into gold on accident, Zoe. Do you know how he gets her back and gets everything back from changing to gold? Because he asked Dionysus at the point, like, hey, this is a curse. I don't want to turn everything into gold. And he tells him, well, take it down to this river in Turkey and wash him in that river. And when you wash him in the river, you'll get him back. And he washes Zoe to get her back. And it's ironic because in the last page of the Bible, in the Septuagint, when you do the interlinear translation, it's the high door of Zoe is the water of life. That's the last thing we receive in the Bible from the bride and from the Holy Spirit, from the pneuma and from the bride. So I think it's ironic that Zoe, that high door of Zoe, that water of life, there's a lot of paths, I'm just going to say, for the future that are going to interconnect with the water of life and the burning of purple and Zoe in the Bible.
I also wanted to ask, Old Boy, because you read Apollonius of Rhodes in the Greek now. Does he talk about, because in the translation I read, there's some weird passages where they talk about boiling Jason and steaming him. Do you know what I'm referencing?
Yes, I do. There's actually, I believe it was either an Etruscan mirror, and it depicts him in like a giant crater, and he's in there like slumped down in it while Medea's around the outside of it as well. So I have seen an image, and you know, this is an artifact they've actually found with that depiction on it. Although, with regards to the text, I haven't read that section of it myself. I've literally just dived into Apollonius in the section regarding Medea creating the Promethean drug.
Well, I mean, just being in that crater vessel.
Perfect. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was saying, just being in that crater vessel, that crater, that would straight away say unmixed wine, which is hard, heavy. There's some substances going on there straight away.
Yeah, it looks like, some kind of almost like a fumigation.
Right.
That was my thought, is that when I was reading Wretch's text on these kind of fumigation rites, it really reminds me what Herodotus is saying about the Scythians. And it also is similar to what various sources are saying about the Hebrews. You know, they were erecting these tents, they're digging these holes, and then they're hotboxing them. And it's almost like she's creating like a steam bath and then bathing him in the steam, in the smoke, and that, as well as applying this oil. But it's not simply like a christening. There's a baptism, there's fire, and there's oil, you know?
Yeah, and that's very well depicted on that image. I'll have to find it again and I'll send it over to you.
Amazing. But yeah, let's get into Arrhenius here, because I know this is an amazing book. I've perused it, and he lays the mysteries in some of the crazy Gnostic stuff to bear. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and as well, there's a prime example of how someone's trying to be conservative with the translation, and I'll point that out in a moment. So this is with regards to Marcus Magus and his group. So it says here, pretending to consecrate cups mixed with wine and protracting to great length the word of invocation, he contrives to give them a purple and reddish colour, so that Harris, who is one of those that are superior to all things, should be thought to drop her own blood into that cup through means of his invocation, and that thus those who are present should be led to rejoice to taste of that cup, in order that, by doing so, the charis who is set forth by this magician may also flow into them. And then he basically goes on where he, pronounces these words, and then it says, repeating certain other like words, and thus goading on the wretched women, in brackets, to madness. And you're looking at it, and this is what first stood out to me. I thought, goading on the wretched women, but in brackets, to madness. That's
Maenads, anyone?
that's jumping out
absolutely.
at me as somebody's not wanted to translate it for what it is, so they've had to put to madness in brackets to try and convey it. But obviously, first off, we have the purple and reddish colour. So, that's Revelations. We have the purple and scarlet. We just had the Proto-Evangelion of James with the purple and scarlet. Once again, we've got a reference to the purple and scarlet being mixed into some kind of wine. And then we've also got this mention of Haris. Now, if we look at the Greek text here, I've underlined purple there, porpoureia. So it's a different word to porphyra, but it still conveys the meaning of purple. Now, charis here is very interesting because, as you can see here, it says the graces, handmaids of Aphrodite. So Haris means grace, and it's also use of the graces. And then we can see here, it also says, in an objective sense, outward grace of favour, beauty. And again, here it says plural of the graces. But at the bottom, it also says of a love charm or filter as well, which was very interesting to me. So they're clearly using a term here. This is a Hellenistic term they're using here in this rite. And then the word here for inciting the women to madness is actually, if you look at the Greek text, ex oistresas. So you've got. So I'm sure I heard a biblical scholar say the term oistress wasn't used by any Christians, but it looks like Irenaeus here does actually use the term, and you can see it comes from oistrao, and it says here, sting of the gadfly, hence the metaphor to madness. So when
gadfly, bruh,
madness, it's oistrous.
So absolutely Dionysian, absolutely the drugs, absolutely the sex, absolutely the completely gone mad, out of your mind, possibly reset, let it all out. It's like a safety valve kind of an idea. And just let it all out. You go mad. Go on, Snappy.
I also wanted to just point out, though, like, we're love charm, love potions. This is connecting us directly to the story of Heracles' apotheosis, right? He's swindled, he's drugged, and then he's burned, right? Wow, that's wild.
And what's really interesting as well is, as you can see, I've just underlined on oisterous at the bottom, madness or frenzy, and then you can see it's used of the maenads there. And
could
now,
you?
Yep.
I'm sorry. Could you tell us up there at line 8, red underline, the fly that tormented Io? Now, our audience may not know who Io is.
So it's just another character in one of the myths where it's using this same Orphic vox, this same cult kind of terminology. So that's why I thought I would just highlight that there, just because you can see it's being used in other Greek works to reference a similar thing. And then what I just want to point out exactly how it's being used is here you can see it's used of the maenads. Now in Euripides' Bacchae, Dionysus is described as a daimon. Now if we just go back to the English translation of Irenaeus, and it says here, it appears probable enough that this man possesses a demon as his familiar spirit, by means of whom he seems to be able to prophesy, and also enables as many as he counts worthy to be partakers of his charis themselves to prophecy. Now, daimon is how, as I've said, is how Dionysus is described in the Bacchae. And you can see here, god or goddess. Now, it's translated as demon. And I just wanted to point out here, it isn't necessarily a bad entity. It's used of gods and goddesses. And as I said, Dionysus is referred to as being a daimon. And as we know, with being entheos, the word entheos, taking in the god, being possessed by the entity, by the daimon, by the divinity, and that leads to the madness and the prophecy. And I just wanted to point out that mantica, prophecy, and mania, according to Plato's Phaedrus, used to be the same word. So really, when they're talking about this demon being the means of how he prophesizes, again, it's being used in the same context as someone who is possessed by Bacchus in order to enter into that state of mania, which culminates in the prophecy being given.
Right.
So,
and it's important too that we talk about with daimon, this idea that the daimon, as you're pointing out, right, these are considered intermediary beings. Okay. And we know this for sure. Like Plato discusses this. He has in one of his dialogues, the magician Diotima, right? She describes what the nature of daimons are, and they are no, it has nothing to do with morality. They have varied morality. They're described as being human-like and as intermediaries, able to converse between worlds. And you have to approach the daimon before you can approach a god. You can never speak to a deity directly. You go through a daimon. And as you mentioned too, right? The highest kind of thing was to enter these states of mania and to be possessed, right? Socrates, another person described as the gadfly, right, is possessed by a daimon. He has a demon that speaks to him. And this is part of the reason why he's said to be the smartest person, not only because he admits to not knowing anything and he's chosen by Delphi, the oracles, but because he has a daimon, you know?
And even just in the Greek text here, I've just highlighted another word, which is propheteuein, which is an infinitive, and it relates to the word. You'll hear the word prophet in there. So if we take a look at that word on the LSJ, you can see, look, to be a prophetess or interpreter of the gods. But then if you look here, right at so it's the top slide, but it's the bottom underlined section that I've underlined where it says, Hemania propheteusasa. And then it says with oracular power, and that's quoting Plato's Phaedrus there. And you'll see the first word is here mania, and mania is obviously madness, which is the second slide. Enthusiasm, inspired.
This seems to be, sorry to interject, but this seems to be rolling towards the word prophet rather than what we think of as madness. It's as if it's primarily meaning magic, as it were, like prophet. What we say, the word we use for madness really means prophesizing. I mean, you've got to be off your head to do it, and I've gone slightly mad, but wow, okay, that's really interesting.
It is, yeah, like you were saying, mania and mantica used to be this, apparently, according to that source, used to be the same word, and he calls the insertion of the letter tau to be a tasteless insertion, according to the text. But you'll also see here mania, number 3, Roman numeral number 3, passion, and then that Greek word there is erotike. So you can see how it's it's all related. The
more Orphic stuff, right? Orphic Voss. This takes us to that cosmogonic eros, right? Which is the driving force of creation, which is that madness, right?
And takes you back to those two twins that we were talking about before. It's this yin and yang principle, magnetic, electric, male, female. It always goes there. You know, well, it does seem to be the base of reality. That's so interesting.
Yeah, so I've just, I've probably got, let me have a look. I've got the Argonautica here by Apollonius Rhodius. And I just want to quickly just show here, there's a couple here that are quite interesting, actually. So I'll just go over this very quickly because I know you're probably going to want to be wrapping up shortly. So the section I translated, it says, thereupon the handmaids were making ready the chariot, and Medea meanwhile took from a hollow casket a charm, which men say is called the charm of Prometheus. So the word that's actually being used is pharmakon. which I've highlighted in the Greek text here, which, as we know, means a drug. As you can see here, drug, whether healing or noxious, a healing remedy or medicine. And then I've just underlined at the bottom there again, enchanted potion, filter, hence charm or spell. So you can see when they've translated that as a charm, they're really meaning pharmacon or drug. And then it says, if a man should anoint his body, having first appeased the maiden, the only begotten, with sacrifice by night, surely that man could not be wounded by the stroke of bronze, nor would he flinch from blazing fire. But for that day, he would prove superior both in prowess and in might. Now, just actually to highlight, this is not my translation I'm reading. This is the general translation. What I did is I did a translation myself without looking at it. And then what I did is I went through, see how they translated it, and I went in and looked at interesting words. So I've highlighted only begotten. They translated it as only begotten. However, the LSJ, I couldn't find it in there, but it seems to be created from two words joined together. So munos, which is alone or solitary, only, and then genesis, origin, source, or manner of birth. So you can see why they've chosen to translate it as only begotten.
That's so wild to me. Okay, I just got to interject because there's this whole concept I've been talking about in Shaivism, right? The religion of Shiva, Kashmiri Shaivism specifically. There's this idea that part of the grandiose mystery is it's not enough to go to the one. The one, if you stop with the one, is an illusion. You have an affirmed life. You have an affirmed creation. You have to then see the one in the many and recognize that while even this perception is kind of an illusion, it is a reality in another sense. And this is what they call moving from the I am to the I am that. And etymologically, it's really related to this idea of the one and the origin, right? It's like the masculine is this idea of timelessness, okay, that cannot be changed. And then the feminine is that time itself in its erratic state. So it seems to me like this is really reflecting of this primordial idea you see in a lot of these Indian kind of religions, as well as indigenous religions, where you do have this kind of interconnection sense of oneness, but it's not enough. You have to also recognize the reality and affirm life, affirm the many, affirm the creation. And it's through the perception of creation that you get to the one. And this is how you create that. Like in the Indian texts, you create the Adharnahari Ishvara, which is the penultimate moment before oneness, where it's masculine and feminine in one being. We see the same thing in the Orphic with Phanes, right? We see the same thing with Bacchus and Venus, this uniting in this love affair, right?
I think we might see it here as well, Snappy. I think that analogy of not being able to be cut with bronze, I think that's particularly... If it's, I see a lot of the alchemical ideas going back a lot further than you think they do, and bronze would be made of tin and copper. Well, tin's Jupiter and copper's Venus in the Roman tradition, or Aphrodite and Zeus, however you want to put it. So that would be like a going beyond bodily desires and then going beyond fate itself. So we're going beyond the one there. Zeus is the one. Zeus is the one god in that pantheon. So I know there's more primary gods, so that's the way we're going. If you're unable to be cut by those things, as it were, it's just an idea, but the analogy.
No, I think you're onto something there, because I've seen this reflected in later Christian mysticism too, right? Where you have to move beyond. Some of these Christian mystics get killed for it. You'll see this kind of representative in Meister Eckhart, where you have to move beyond the masculine father to the transcendent mother. And they even do this thing where they feminize that masculine god to give birth to the world, right? But again, it's this idea of the one and many. This is such a huge point of many mystical traditions. And it's a subtle difference, but it's a huge difference, right? Life affirming versus life negating. Nihilism versus the unfolding of cycles and evolution.
Nice.
What's really interesting as well about the bronze, I read a note in one of the lexicons in the LSJ lexicon, and it was about Calchas, and it says they believed that the name actually came from the color of corroded bronze. Now, when you look at bronze, Calchas is there's a swapping. Instead of being Calchas, it's Halkos. And that is the word for bronze or copper. So it's very similar. Instead of being the kappa at the beginning, it's the he that's at the beginning.
So
like
are you saying that's so it's just rather than a corruption, it's a purposeful swap?
It just seems like a swap. But the interesting thing is that when you heat copper or bronze, it does go a bluey purple color as well.
Yeah. When you're burning, when you want to change the color of fire, if you want to change it like basically the color of copper sulfate, you do put copper in there, and it will turn that lovely bluey green color, maybe purple on the tips.
That's
it.
Really. I showed a video.
Doesn't Hal indicate salt though?
Sorry, say again.
Salt. What was the word you used? The other, was it like Halkov? You said.
Yes.
Halkov.
So Calchas. Let me just go to my slide. I've got Calchas's name on here. So see, you can see at the top there, Calche. However, you take the kappa at the beginning is swapped with the he.
H.
Yeah. So it's he, alpha, lambda, kappa.
Right.
Sigma, and that means bronze.
That's wild to me. It seems so connected.
It's very magicians do stuff like that, though. That's when you know they've been at it.
I can actually show you. I can show you in the text. Let me just find it because it's actually in this Argonautica text. It's there. So can you see where my cursor is?
Yep.
That is. That's a genitive of the word there. So you can see this. The stem of it is halko.
Interesting. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah.
But you were going to get to some other words. I'm really excited to see you had highlighted the Caspian shell here, and then this night wandering bremo.
Yeah.
I can't wait till you get to that. So we got to continue
that's
here.
A really interesting word, you know.
Well, bromios, right? I won't say anything. I'll let you do your spiel.
Yes. So here the translation says, the dark juice of it, like the sap of a mountain oak, she had gathered in a Caspian shell to make the charm withal. Now, let me have a look. I'm just getting my notes here. So she gathered in the Caspian murex shell the dark moisture, such as is the kind of the oak in the mountains, to treat as a drug. So that was my translation of it. So it isn't the word charm, and the word that's being used is here, and you can see for in the Caspian shell, it's Caspii en Chochloi, and that's that word there, Chochloi, is, let me just find it. Where will it be? There. That's it. Wow. There, and you'll see shellfish with a spiral shell used for dyeing purple, and then it equates it to the Latin murex. So that's the same shell that we're seeing in all of the other references, all the other cult references. And then the word that's used for to treat, where they say to make the charm, well, that word here, and you'll recognize the root here, pharmacestai. So it's got that pharma root in it, which it comes from this word here, pharmaso. And you can see here, treat by using pharmaca or drugs.
So,
heal or
have you guys noticed anyone? Do you think the purple is directly connected to the love potion part of the rite? Specifically, yes. Because that seems to be what this is referencing in the Argonautica.
Yes.
I love potions, two things. Yeah, I love potions, two things in my mind, or maybe three. Obviously, there's the, arousing your ardor, Then there's the actual physical arousal, but also it's to bring on Aphrodite, is it not? And to bring on the beginnings of that mystical transition to
It's also
timelessness,
interesting
the
is that
ionic realm.
Aphrodite is described as cursing people and driving them mad, right? Medea is said to be driven madly in love with Jason, which is why she rips her brother apart, which is why she does all that crazy stuff, you know? So it's like there's even this prophetic madness that's involved with this love cursing and potion power as well.
The energy that we're using is found by the summoning of those erotic powers. The powers are eros itself. You know, in modern mysticism, they just call it the sexual force. You know, so powerful is it? The life force.
I want to bring up a conversation I had with a one-on-one with Amun, where we were talking about the sacred songs during this sacred union, right? Of the sacred right of man and woman, pulling down certain souls into the woman's womb, and it being connected to those sacred songs too. So this is not directly connected to the purple, but it is connected because it is all put in a sacred rite format.
It's got a childbirth edge to it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you want to bring in that sacred child, right? You want to bring in the sacred child, so you sing the sacred song and you do the sacred dance and the rituals.
Yeah, that's how you bring the coming of the new age. It's always related to the song because the goddess, that's what she operates under. She is the vibration of the universe, right? That unfolding, right? Where Kronos, Bacchus, Saturn is that masculine force of infinite time and its infinite point. She's ever expanding. It's like that reverberation. So she is the song. You have to harmonize with her, right?
Yeah. You need the baby with the power. What power? The power of the voodoo.
Hoodoo.
Nobody know the song. Yes, thank you.
Do what? Remind me of the baby. Yeah, we know that one.
You're supposed to sing it with me though.
Oh my goodness.
But I really want to get to this night bringer Brimo thing.
Well, it's it's very pertinent to what Jevons just said there about bringing the divine child, because there's quite a lot here in these last sentences. So my translation was, and this is as she's collecting this moisture in the shell to use as a drug. It says, having bathed in the 7 ever-flowing waters and having summoned 7 times Brimo, the nursing mother, Brimo, who roams by night, Chthonian, Wanasa to those beneath the earth, in gloomy night with dark shrouds. Now, we've obviously got they've translated it as nurse of youth. So you've got that, that mother kind of idea coming through. You have Wanasa of those beneath the earth. So you've got that underworld connotation. And then the word for night wandering. Now it's Nuktipolon. Now, if we have a look at Nuktipolon, comes from Nuktipolos, and look, roaming by night, Bacchae. And then it says,
holy crumbs,
Persephone, of epithet of Zagreus. So
of Artemis too. Whoa.
Yeah. And it also says coupled with magoi as well, which is the plurus for a magus as well. So that's a loaded word.
Can you say the word again? Because it sounds quite naughty.
Yeah, Nuktipolos. Sorry,
Nuktipolos. Think of a lot of epithets we see for Venus in the later Roman tradition. She's the wandering star, right? She makes that star shape in the sky of her pattern as well, right?
That's a good point. Very good point.
So I just had a eureka moment while you were speaking. Then, do you remember we were referencing the wool at the beginning, and with what you were just talking about? Then it reminded me of Ammon talking about the golden fleece as having received the excess juices from these mystery lover couples that are excreting all these things from the bodies. Well, then you had your burnt wool at the beginning. Do you remember the burnt wool?
Yeah.
So I'm just putting those two things together in my head because the fleece is wool.
Well, that's
And how
very
are you going to
interesting.
get all those sticky bits off the fleece? You're not going to, you know what I mean? You need to disinfect that to some extent, don't you? So maybe burning was a way to make it, having it on the wool, having used it in context, now having it on the wool, it's now portable. How are we going to liberate that? Well, an easy way would be burning it. Possibly, it's just up there.
Well,
I think it's a good
above
idea.
the fire. Part of the technique is that the wool is above the fire, so that it's kind of like a steaming or baking. It's like a culinary. You don't want to just light it on fire. You want to drip the oils and collect them in those magical cups.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly what's being described in the text by Dioscorides as well. You know, he says they arrange it in strips over pieces of wood that are over the top of like a container, and then it's lit from underneath, and it says they collect the oils that run off.
With
then
pine resin too. They use pine resin.
It does say that in the text.
It's also interesting too that the fleece is said to have the song written upon it, right?
Yeah,
so then I wonder about what inks are used in the song, if this is also a drug, and then how are they reading this if it's also being burned, you know? There's so much interesting stuff happening.
Wow. Okay, that's great. That's a lot to think about in the near future.
Well, that basically concludes my presentation as well.
Amazing. I also just wanted to add that the Brimo line that you pointed out, that is an epithet for people related to Helios, usually Apollo or Dionysus, but you even see it in sometimes with Artemis, but always the roaring gods who are related to the sun, you know? And that we know the sun is the one who generates the earth and brings this family, right? Hecate is the first, and then Circe, Medea, right? Those are the descending generations of this line of Helios, right? And it all goes back to that Heracles myth I showed from Herodotus, because he sleeps with the snake mother, right? And starts the Scythian line.
Yeah, that's nicely put, Snappy.
Am
I right just to stop sharing and come back into the room?
Yeah.
I just discovered that the word for bromine is a Greek word derived from a Greek word, bromos, which means stink or stench. So
I was
the actual
just about
word,
to ask about that.
Yeah, because that word you just said, then I couldn't read what it actually was because my screen's too small.
Brimo.
Yeah, it made me think, what's the etymology of bromine, and it is stink and stench, apparently. So that's interesting.
Bromius is an epithet of Dionysus as well. Does it mean thunderer?
Thunderer. Sometimes it's translated as roarer, but this is a very common epithet. It's mostly associated with Dionysus, but also it's always associated with the Helios figures. Okay, it's something that reoccurs again and again, but it's interesting. It's more. It has to do, I think, with the mushroom and the thundering. You know, you also see this in the Indian with Indra. Right, he also wailed, and Hercules as well. They have these clubs. They draw the thunder, and it brings that lightning. You know,
there's two apostles of the sons of thunder as well. I can't remember which two, but they're clearly
Boanerges.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
and
Dionysus himself,
right?
He's the penis,
thunder,
born of a penis and thunder. Yeah,
right. With the sons of thunder, right? One of them is James. One of them is John. Right, so John is John the Beloved, the hermaphrodite, who is the cup. And there's a lot of speculation, like most Christian sources of the earlier Catholic ones, right? When Ammon first brought up that the thing with the naked boy, I grew up in the Catholic tradition, so my thought was, oh, that's just John the Beloved. It's gay sex. This is his lover running away, right? But it's highly debated, but that's one potential idea for who that kid was in the park, right? Is this intersexed lover of Jesus? And remember, John the Beloved is the child of Mary Salome, okay, number one, and is the one who touches Jesus, and is the only one who touches Jesus in the entire Bible, the only one other than Mary who washes his feet. These are all sexual allusions. Okay?
I totally believe it, because I came in from the other direction. I came in from studying the star sign Aquarius, who is Ganymede, who is this same thing for Zeus, and he's the cupbearer. He keeps all the ambrosia, the ichor for the ichor producing stuff of the gods. And he's a pederast, and a catamite.
It's the same thing. And if you look too, there's a really famous artwork that Dion found with John the Beloved, clearly a hermaphroditic intersexed person, intersex person, and he's bearing a cup of snakes.
Yeah,
they're bearing a cup of snakes. It's wild.
If anybody knows, just goes onto Wikipedia and look at the images of John the Beloved. They are hilarious. They go from quite feminine to a flaming whoopsie. There's like a proper, oh, Jesus is dying. I mean, it's funny how feminine he is. It is literally comedy. It's like a 1970s British comedy kind of a thing. Oh, check it. Jesus is dying, love. He's dying. Look at him up there.
You also have to remember there is this strong tradition about mysticism being a feminine practice. And there's all this stuff about mystics undergo the rites of not engaging in sex, and they remove themselves through procreation, either through castration or drug use. We have a lot of these references with people with hemlock, abusing hemlock and then never having kids, So it's deeply rooted in this kind of mystical traditions as well. But I wanted to point out too, what's wild about the other twin, James. Okay. James is the crazy, violent one. James, the other son of thunder, is said to do what? He goes to Artemis at Ephesus's temple and tears it down with the Christians. Okay. And then the next time he shows up in the literature Dean and I found is during the Spanish Inquisition, where he becomes Saint James the Black Killer. And they invoke him to remove the Moors from Spain.
Matamoros.
And they use him again during the colonialization period in Spain to attack the indigenous people.
So his brother, he's super masculine, John's super feminine. That's really I didn't know that other half of it.
The Sons of Thunder.
John is the most interesting of all the apostles for me. He's like the key. Judas gives you a few keys as well, but John more than anyone.
You got to read the occulted, the Gospel of Judas, because that gets really wild. We've been trying to get Ammon to read it, but we were having trouble finding it in the Greek. I know that Wretch read it in the sources. I haven't read it directly, so take me with a grain of salt. But from our conversations and whatnot, it was all about how Judas is in an abusive relationship with Jesus and then rats him out.
Hey, well, he put that demon into him with that bread. He made him eat with that ergotized bread at the Last Supper, which was an agape love feast, and they were taking people upstairs, the little sheepkins. Just saying, there's more to the story.
Yeah, no, I'm totally down with that, and it goes very astro-theological after that, and he gets these 30 pieces of silver, which is the moon, and 30 nights, and you're getting into like Odin territory then, because it's the subconscious, and it's kind of telling you what the drugs were doing to him.
Yeah, because Odin was hung, and so is Iscariot is supposedly hung. Judas is hung in some of the versions. The hanging man symbology.
Why is Odin hung?
An erection after that.
Why is Odin hung? Okay,
for 9 days.
For two things, though. He has his eye removed and he's hung. To do what? To gain the women's magic. To gain the women's magic of Freya. To connect to his feminine side and then learn the secrets of life and death. That's what he gains from this process. His removing of his eye, it's a symbolic vulva on the face. Okay, he becomes feminized, and by embracing that feminine side, he gains the magic of Freya, right?
There can be no doubt that all the magical traditions end up with the feminine, especially seeing as they were mostly written down by men. But it's searching for that feminine place, because there's not. It's like an empty room kind of an idea. You're going outside yourself to the other, and the other is a womb.
But I know you've studied this, Old Boy, in the Norse text. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, what I will say is there's references to cross-dressing as well in the Norse mythology. You know, some of the characters, they do dress up as females. The magic is always described as a female's art. and I can't remember which character it is off the top of my head, but one of them is kind of chastised for doing this magic because it's seen as feminine. And obviously, when you look at the Volvers and stuff, you know, you look at basically the equivalent of the LSJ for the Old Norse. They make a lot of connections to the Greek mysteries. Even the word runa, it literally says musterion Greek, and that comes through the Gothic, because when you look at the Gothic language, it seems to have been borrowing quite a lot, because they were obviously in that proximity. They were used in the Varangian Garden stuff as well, so they're in that area really when you look at it.
So do you think there's then a possibility that runes actually mean mysteries rather than what we know as the letters, the runes? Do you think that maybe one's been made up after the other?
Well, it's got other connotations as well, such as the whispering of a wise woman, stuff like that. So I would have to pull it up again to read exactly what it says. But when I looked at it, there's a lot of allusion to the mysteries, and even the Volvers, they're even translated as Sibyls sometimes. The translations will actually call them Sibyls.
Where did that come from? That just seemed like, that's amazing. Well, it's that Proto-Indo-European Aryan root to it all. They're all sharing the same stuff anyway.
Well, Snorri Sturluson, he says in his text, he says that they originate over in Troy. He says the Aesir originate over there. I think it's Thor, he says, heads over to Thrace, where he then meets the woman who's called Sibyl, and he marries her. And then, I mean, those Thracians are right next door to all the Scythians, you know, on the southwest coast of the Black Sea. So the practices, they look very similar. The Volvers have been found buried with staffs. They've been found with cannabis seeds, henbane seeds. You know, what they're doing, they give the oracles and the prophecies from a high chair as well. It's pretty much exactly what you would expect. And then where the text says that he met this first woman called Sibyl was in Thrace. So it's in an area where you would expect to find these people as well. So
it's even said that like a lot of these Vikings, they're doing what's called the Achillean rites and stuff, where a lot of these there's a misconception about the Vikings. They actually did a lot of really feminized practices like bathing and wearing the hair long. And this is purposeful. It's in the Scythian tradition. You see this still surviving in characters like Achilles, right? And this is from this much older ancient war tradition. Dyeing the hair blonde, wearing it long, wearing the girdle. The Vikings did this. They look like
the Birka.
They look like Achilles.
The Birka shield maiden, they originally thought was a man because of her burial, the way she was buried with the horses, right, and the war regalia and the gaming pieces. It has come out that they have, they found henbane in her burial. And I think that's amazing. And the reason I love that is because I actually have a DNA connection to this Birka shield maiden. And I was like, wow, it went way north, right? Like this mystery is everywhere.
One thing I wanted to ask Old Boy about, because I know you were digging into this, Ryan brought up the ruins. I want you to expand a bit, because I remember you were looking at the ruins, connecting it to the Colibran of the Welsh, as well as to the Etruscan languages, right? And Ammon insists that the Etruscan is always the key here. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so basically when it says the word for divination, it basically even cites Latin sortes in the lexicon. It says when they cast lots, it's exactly the same as the Latin sortes. And the Etruscan, they had a different version called sors, obviously using the same root. And there's an example in the Etruscan Museum in Rome, and they have one of these tokens, and it's a wooden piece, and it's got inscriptions on it, and it says that they would have some favorable, some unfavorable inscriptions. They would be cast on the floor, and they would be interpreted. This is how the Etruscans were apparently doing it. Obviously, the sortes later, they used, books to do it instead. However, the runes were written on pieces of wood called a kefli, and it seems to have been utilized in the same way. And then you also have the cauldron, and again, there's debate on whether they're authentic or not at the moment. But when you look at how they were used, apparently inscribed on pieces of wood again, it all seems to be used in exactly the same way. So I'm wondering if the language and the runes, they seem to be inherently connected as well to these mysteries. And then you go back to Herodotus, and he's talking about these Scythian and Ares, who they prophesize by braiding and unbraiding these 3 willow wands together, these 3 pieces of willow, while giving the prophecy. And it's, then you look at the Awen symbol, and it's the 3.
Yeah.
It's the
Right.
3.
The Inari, for our audience who isn't aware, these are the cross-dressing trans priestesses in the Scythian culture who would go through these transformation rites through cannabis and castration.
Braver than me.
Yeah, and they seem to be doing a very similar thing. You've got the symbol of the Welsh Awen, which I believe is past, present, and future, which is exactly how Calchas is described in the Iliad, as knowing the things that were, the things that are, and the things that will be. It's that bringing that past, present, and future together.
And to me, it connects back to this idea of that Trinity that we see at the root, the Holy Family, this idea of the Great Mother and the 2 children, that's so traditional and ancient. And that Arwen symbol with the 3 lines, you see this show up all over the place culturally. And I mean, it's because it's such a simple symbol, it's debated. But to me, it just seems so clear. You're drawing down the stars. And where they would put these is they would put them on these ritual tables, right? Like I was looking at these ritual tables that had been survived from Minoa. And you know what they would do on these they divide them into 3 sections, and then they would write inscriptions. Usually the one that stood out to me was Pentateos, basically the same phrase that we have in modern Greek, to all the gods, or sometimes they describe other different deity names. The other one that would come up often is Dionysus or Dionyso in the Minoan.
Dionysus.
Totally wild. Well, he's the god of trees in the earliest ones, which is kind of wild because it's like the Dionysus image continues to expand and expand and expand and expand. He seems to be related to this idea of the tree rising up and growing and trying to reach for the stars.
Why did they also? Did you ever work out what the symbol of the spear was attached to the tree? Because there's like there's a few of his paraphernalia I often see with the symbology of that. Is it like a post-mortem tree? Has he died and the tree's growing? I never understood that symbology.
It's also it's about the scepter. It's about, you have to recognize that the scepter is the phallus, is the wand. Magic in this tradition, it's all about dividing time. And how do you divide time? You compare it against. What are we comparing against? The Great Mother or Saturn, really, or the sun?
Yeah.
These are the things that are permanent in our universe, or the closest thing to permanent, right? The masculine energy is about cutting. Saturn is that force that cuts and divides time. The scepter, who wields the scepter, is the one who cuts, who sits on that throne and wields the power, right? And so that's what this is about. The tree gives you the staff, is the pole, is that phallus. And it's that phallus that the mother wants to wield, right? She doesn't have that pole. She has to wield it through others.
So is he, because there's specifically a spear there, and it just reminds me of Odin on the ash tree, spearing himself, which I think is possibly a mushroom reference. It's the mushroom, European mushroom.
Phallus. It's always the same thing. It makes me think of, when you go back into the Indian, you have the lingam, the phallus of Shiva, that's sitting inside of the vulva, the yoni of Parvati. And when they enter like this, what do? They create the endless pillar of fire. The united, that is supposed to be symbolic of this one and the many, right? The exploding of creation, but also that eternal oneness where they have become one primordial being and they're forever engaged in that cosmic lovemaking, and it's that massive phallus, but it's the active phallus. The fire is the feminine and the pillar is the masculine, right? Or that snake that wraps up, like in all of the Greek imagery, it's the snake that wraps the pillar, that wraps the wand, that wraps the egg, right? The feminine is the snake, the pillar is the masculine.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sorry to rant there, guys. What do you idea on? We haven't heard from you in a bit.
Well, what you guys were just talking about, I was thinking of the thyrsus, the fennel stalk, and how it had different powers. It could bring forth wine or milk or water.
The torch.
Yeah. Or the Maenads would use it to dominate men. And it's that the phallus, the spear, the sundial, the maypole, the Shivalinga.
They put like ivy leaves sometimes in the top as well because it could stop you getting quite as off your head as you might have done.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
There's all kinds of stuff in there, and you can't deny that the spine to the pineal gland as well. That's got to be in there.
100%, totally. It also relates to this idea, right, of you have to build the tower, right? We've gotten out of this traditional way of thinking. We've clouded things with her morality. The Great Mother is a whore. She wants to make love with her creation. She wants to make love and produce. That's what she does. She makes love. How do you draw down the goddess? You make a giant phallus. You build the Tower of Babel. You make the Tower of Babel, right? That's the whole point.
You write poetry to seduce her.
Right?
Sonnets to woo her.
Right? You have to make her orgasm to make the plants grow. That's what all the fertility rites are about too.
Exactly.
And it would seem that after today, one of the takeaways is that the purple is a symbol of fertility, and a fertility is a symbol of power. That hence pharaohs and kings and queens have to do these rituals in front of the public once a year to show that they're still fertile. Hence, you could lead and be in charge. And purple is part of being fertile and being in charge. I can see that aspect of it.
I would say that brings us back to the opening statements that Snappy had a little go about how important it was, this purple in the ancient world, how it represented wealth and dominance and regality. Well, it's a magic symbol. It's a symbol, and that's exactly what you said then. Its main power, more than anything, is that it is linked to all these primary building blocks of the universe, which are energy and sex and that oisterous, necessity to go to go with your urges. Essentially, the urges really play at you.
Well, we're also the occult explorers, so I have to give you the occult crazy explanation. And the occult crazy explanation is that every single noble family on earth are actually succubi and incubus, and they're all drawing down demons, and this is where their wealth comes from.
You've been talking to David Icke again.
Oh, Lord.
What have I told you about talking to Dave?
Except in this version, the reptilians are purple.
Purple Tillians.
My hair's purple. Did y'all notice?
Purple people eaters. Oh, cool.
Purple hair.
Oh, like that.
Anyway, I want to ask y'all, what time is it in England right now?
Oh, bedtime.
Ooh, I appreciate y'all coming on. We're going to have you back for more. Definitely go to Old Boy's channel, subscribe. There's at least 6 or 7 of his videos I saw in the Purple series. Going from Medea to Rome to finding purple in England. You're going to have to subscribe to Ryan 7 if you're into the tarot, you're into sacred geometry, gematria, any of that stuff.
Theater Square.
Buffy. Do you like tarot? Well, Buffy upstairs, she gives readings 2-3 times a week. And you're already here at Drawing Down the Stars. So like and subscribe, share, and leave comments. Just reminding y'all. Because we're only getting started. We're going to have a lot more fun.
Yep. To end it off, I'll do what... Go ahead, Ryan. Sorry.
I was saying this was a particularly fun one. I think having the extra person on the panel, especially somebody with a bit of expert knowledge in the etymology and the real history of it, and having actually gone and done and looked in the books in the medical texts. I think we've had a nice little banter here and had an explore as we promised.
Beautiful. So with that being said, let's get last words from everyone. So Old Boy, what do you want to leave the audience with?
I just want to say, to you, thank you so much for asking me here. It's been a really great conversation. Just to the audience, I would just say, go out there, track down some of these sources. Topo's text is really good. I went on there, searched purple, and it brought up a list of where it's being used. It's being, it's referenced everywhere, but I went through and looked for all the interesting texts that featured it. So that's a good way to go and find. If you just want to hone in on one topic, go and use that, have a look and see what texts come up, because you'll be surprised. So that's my final thought. Thank you, everybody.
Topo's text, one of the best resources. Ryan, final words from you.
I want to finish off the David Bowie song from before, but I'm not going to get my way, so I don't have anything to say. No. Fed up. No sports.
All right, go watch The Labyrinth and marvel at David Bowie's hot pants. All right, Dion.
Yeah. I can't keep my eyes off David Bowie in that film, and I'm proper straight.
The Labyrinth. Well, join us next week. We're going to get deeper into these mystery rites and how it connects to the Bible and ancient royal families and psychoactives, and we'll go way deep next time.
Love to hear it. Looking forward to what you bring. Jevim, last words for the audience.
I have several. Can I take several? Okay, if you want to know the mystery, you have to do the hard work. The helpers are here to help, but we cannot lead you to the water. You have to figure out how to get to the water. Yep. And another one, announcement. We are doing a full moon reading at 7 this coming Friday for the strawberry moon. Ryan, you're invited if you want to come and read some cards.
If I'm awake, I'll definitely be there. Yeah, sounds good.
Well, it's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It'd be 12 your time, so you can take a crack at it if you want.
Yeah, I'll do my best.
Okay. And what we do there is we take readings from the audience. So it's our way, Snappy and I, is our way of giving back to the community. And with any luck, we'll have Gypsy back on here at some point. So we'll see.
Oh, great. Oh, that's fantastic.
Well, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you guys so much. We're going to be back next week with more Occult Society Live. And on the new moon, we are going to be doing a special every new moon where Neil and Ammon will be special guests for that new moon episode. So make sure you come in for that one when we do that. Next week, I wanted to announce I'm doing a special show with my friend Graham for Searching for Dragons, where we're going to talk about the hymn to the mother of all gods. If you're interested in this topic, what we're talking about here, these empire building rites and surviving collapse rites, this is the text. This is when Ammon first told me about this text, he called it the most important text in Latin. So I thought it was one of the most rewarding texts I've ever read. It drew a lot of these puzzle pieces together. And to just put it home, at the beginning of the hymn, Julian opens with, "Should I reveal the secrets? Do I profane the mystery?" He does. Answer, he does. So we're going to be going through that. We'll be profaning the mystery. That'll be happening on Saturday with my good friend Graham. And we'll be back next Sunday with more of this. And again, the new moon with our special with Neil and Ammon. So thank you, everyone. Peace and love. Hail Satan. We'll be back next time. Take care.